Bum, 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 ba, dum, ba, dum, ba, bum, 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 bum. This is the Bleacher Nation Podcast. Yeah.
I didn't know you had clicked recording yet, and I thought you were just like having a good time over there. And now I see the red recording, which means this is staying in. This is
we needed intro music, so I thought I'd take care of it myself.
Do we still not? Is there no audio overlaid for the intro?
No, we gotta just like pick.
We gotta do that. What is this, like episode 40 or so? I think it's about time.
39, I think.
39. As Michael alluded to in his sing-songy doo-wop intro, it's the BN Cubs podcast. He's Michael Cerami. I'm Brett Taylor. We're going to talk some Cubs at you today, thanks to our sponsors at Ankin Law, 312-6 million, injury law made personal, and got good amount to get into. Obviously, this week it's a double deadline week. We had the 40-man roster deadline for purposes of the Rule 5 draft. Not the sexiest for a podcast, although we can touch on it lightly. The bigger one, at least for purposes of discussing bigger names, was the qualifying offer acceptance deadline, which very directly impacted the Cubs. I guess for the rostering deadline, the 40-man Rule 5 thing, do you have anything to say? Basically, the Cubs added James Triantos, Pedro Ramirez, and Riley Martin to the 40-man roster to ensure that they are unavailable to be selected next month in the Rule 5. The rest of the prospects who are now eligible tend to be guys like Christian Hernandez, who's a legit Cubs prospect, but he just played at high A, and no big league team is going to draft him to go directly onto their big league roster.
Where they have to stay.
And they have to stay all season. That's the thing to remember about the Rule 5 is you will see good prospects left unprotected, but it's a it's a risk reward situation of like, is a team actually going to be able to risk using one of their 26-man spots on a guy who's not going to be able to contribute and try to stash him all year just so that they get to keep him? It's actually increasingly rare that teams approach it that way. And in fact, the Cubs, when they took Gage Workman last year, straight from Double-A, that was very rare because they took him to serve a role on the team. It wasn't really a grab and stash, and he was pretty clearly not ready. Which is sort of how these things go.
Well, the only thing I'll say there, actually, I have a question. First of all, I know that the player that you might be able to enlighten me has to stay on the team all season. What happens if they do? You're the Pirates. Pirates may be a bad example because they're going to spend so much money this offseason. Everyone knows that.
Them and the Marlins.
Whatever team you are, and you grab a Gage Workman. Let's actually just pretend we're the Cubs and Gage Workman's stuck on the team all year long. What happens at the end of the year? Are they still eligible, or do you then gain the rights to? Yeah, sure. You have to keep them on your 40-man or whatever, but can you move them up and down?
They become just a regular player in your organization. Okay. So they would have been added to the 40-man as part of the Rule 5 draft. You wouldn't have been able to option them that year because that's one of the Rule 5 restrictions. But once the year ends, they're just a player on your 40-man, and they, by the way, still have 3 option years.
They should have 3 options, right? So there is a version, like if you're just gonna be horrible, it's not insane. If there was like a really good prospect who was low, you just deal with it for a year and then you send them back to Double-A if you want, which I don't know if anyone really has the guts to. It seems
like we have not seen that. The closest we have seen, and the Cubs did this one time, I forget, it was with a relief prospect from the Phillies, and they got in trouble for something. Oh yeah, they played around with the disabled list to be able to keep him. But Lendy Castillo, there's a throwback to folks. They took him in the Rule 5 straight out of, I think, High A, and they were rebuilding. And it was definitely a stash, but with a reliever, you can at least sort of fudge that you're using him. And the trick is he's got to stay on your roster the full year, but there's an allowance for 90 days on the injured list if he's actually injured. Okay. And so Lendy Castillo, well, what do you know? He was injured for like 89 days. And the Cubs ended up getting.
He was just in AAA working on his defense. It just so happens that it was that exact.
So
Chris Bryant callback for those.
Yeah, for those who don't remember. Yeah, so we just don't see teams do that for whatever reason. And maybe it's because that year that they're having to like stick with the big leagues doesn't really help with their development. And so then they're kind of almost set back a year. I'll be curious to see. As a reliever,
I really feel like you could make it work if you're a bad team and you got 8 spots or whatever. Like,
yeah, well, look, the Cubs have 3 guys in their bullpen right now, 8 spots available on their 40-man still. So we could see them play in the Rule 5 next month. I don't know that it'll be a stash situation. They probably would try to get like a lefty that they could actually use. But, I would
shade there.
What's that?
So some Luke Little shade there, a lefty they can actually use.
Riley Martin, they just added him to the, I think both of those guys will hopefully be useful up and down. They still have options. And Luke Little, man, when he's healthy and right, obviously he's dominant, but he had trouble throwing strikes last year when it mattered.
I didn't put that as a health issue, kind of just a consistency issue, right?
Yeah, I don't know, because he had some like up and down velocity times. So I don't know. And he had finished the previous year. Remember, he got hurt at the end of the previous year. And so I don't know if there was, in fact, there was carryover because he was delayed in spring training. So who knows if it messed up his mechanics. And of course, he's this gigantic dude with long levers that's very hard to maintain mechanics. That's why guys like that don't stay starting pitchers, by the way, for folks who don't know, is those super tall, lanky pitchers. It's really rare that they can stay starters to maintain their mechanics over a full start. It's why like Randy Johnson was a unicorn. We're getting sidetracked, but it's a fun topic. Okay. So as we said, the bigger thing this week was the qualifying offer acceptance deadline. And out of the 13 qualifying offers this year, 4 players accepted: Gleyber Torres, Trent Grisham, Brandon Woodruff, and of course, Shota Imanaga. Some consternation out there about like, oh my gosh, 4 guys, that's a record accepting. And, I think the people who were surprised by those acceptances, I think for one thing, they're not listeners of the BN Cubs podcast, but I think we're just underestimating 2 things. One, the extent to which those 4 guys were real fringy. They were real right at the level where if you are saddled with draft pick compensation, it hammers your market. And players know that, their agents know that, and therefore it makes accepting much more likely. And then 2, I think they were underestimating the impact of the potential labor stoppage. I think players and their agents are looking ahead and thinking, our team's going to be a little more reluctant to sign us to really pricey multiple year deals right now, not knowing what the shape of the game is going to be, much less if there are going to be games next year. I think they're afraid of that. And I think that factored into Shane Bieber's decision. I think it factored into Jack Flaherty's decision. And I think it factored into these 4 guys' decision. And
so the one guy that stands out to me, but you can easily make the argument, is actually Gleyber Torres, but it goes in 2 directions. He had a much, much weaker second half than first half.
You keep talking, by the way. I got to walk and grab something, but you just keep talking. The video people can get to see, but you just keep talking.
It's shockingly hard to talk to no one, but here we go. Gleyber Torres had a much, much stronger first half of the season. He had a 131 rated runs created plus, more walks than strikeouts than he did in the second half of the season, which was a 88 rated runs created plus, and his strikeout rate ballooned by 8%. And so I guess you could maybe make the argument of why he would have rejected if you throw in the fact that he's also 28 years old. So he still has another chance to hit free agency young, but like his overall body of work was pretty good. And I think he is a pretty good player and a young player who can play middle infield and hit above average, which is just a guy that should have value. And
keep in mind for a guy like him, for all those reasons you just said, for him, it's almost a little pillow contracty.
Yes.
It gives him a chance to score big after.
But like he could have gotten a 4 or 5 year deal this winter. I don't see why he wouldn't have. At
he's
28,
always been a polarizing guy for whatever reason. I know,
but like he's mostly good. I'm not saying great, I'm not. But
that's just that Cubs prospect residue sticking to him.
Well, and like it's actually like his 2019 season's residue sticking with me, where he hit 38 bombs. But like, I don't know, he's a 28-year-old second baseman with 150 plus homers. Like, there's no value there. But because he's young enough, it's actually almost like the reverse scenario. It's like, take $22 million for a year. You have multiple chances to get a big contract still. You're still young enough to do that. So that's the one, Shota, I'm not that surprised about. I think maybe if I were him, I would have just taken the 2-year deal. But
for those who don't remember,
the
his option was essentially 2 years, 30 million with an opt-out in the middle. So he could have earned 15 and then scored big, or he had the protection of 30 million guaranteed if things really fell apart. And he instead chose 22/1, which, I mean, that really feels like a 6 of one, half dozen of the other choice.
Because of the opt-out. Because of,
exactly, because he could have walked away anyway.
So you make maybe 7 million less, but if you're opting out, that means you're like, oh, well, I had a good season, so I'm about to make more.
And here's the thing. When the Cubs made the qualifying offer, even if you only looked at the options decisions that they made, that was enough to tell you that him accepting was a possibility. Because on the one side, you had 3 years and 57 million, okay, where the Cubs said that's a little too high. And on his side, 2 years and 30 million, oh, that's a little too low.
Yeah.
Do you know what's just right in there in the middle, and sort of like if you did kind of various math, like a higher AAV 1-year deal is right in the middle of that. Well, guess what? That's what he took. And so, and this is what I want to get into is sort of the impact
how
of this.
Stunned Jed Hoyer was.
The impact of this decision on the Cubs offseason, because if you believed that the Cubs were caught flat-footed by this decision, then you might say, wow, their offseason is like totally altered. 2 things from me, and I wrote about this at bleachernation.com, where you can read the things that we write about the Cubs. 2 things for me are that, one, I just don't believe that they were surprised, because like Michael and I are smart, but we're not like baseball geniuses that know things that executives with more information don't know. And so if we were thinking, yeah, it's a pretty good chance that he accepts because of X, Y, and Z, then the Cubs knew that there was a chance that he was going to accept as well. And they made that offer knowing that he might accept it, and they were going to have him back as a starting pitcher for 1 year and 22 million. And 2, the Cubs came into this offseason needing one front of the rotation impact starter. Everyone would agree, including the Cubs. And then Shota doesn't pick up his option, and then suddenly it's 2 pitchers that they need, right? Like, again, everyone would agree with that, including the Cubs. Well, now they just got one of those 2. It just happens to be the guy who was on the team before, right? So from the start of the offseason to now, I don't see any way anything has changed. If it's true that the Cubs were going to be spending at the top, or going to be willing to spend at the top of that pitching market to pursue one of those top names, like if all of that was true to begin with, then there's no reasonable or plausible explanation why Shota's decision would have changed that. All it changes is, and this is something you have underscored to me, is it changes the ability for the Cubs to pick and choose those 2 pitchers. They kind of had one of them chosen for them. Although I would argue they made the qualifying offer. So that is them kind of choosing Shota as that second pitcher.
Yeah, no. That's exactly right. And I think that I'm going to try to describe some of my feelings as I went through this, because for however we write, that's kind of the beauty of the podcast here a little bit. A lot of the times we're just like kind of working through our feelings and thoughts. And a lot of times Brett and I call each other and I'm like, well, but wait a minute. Like, they were going to maybe get 2 guys. And it's like, well, oh wait, they did just get one of those guys. And it's Shota. So I want to set something aside though, because my initial feelings of frustration when he accepted the qualifying offer was not that, well, now they're not going to sign Dylan Cease or whatever. I think that has remained unchanged. I agree with Brett. Whether or not they were going to was not impacted directly by,
which is not us saying that they're definitely going to get one of those top guys.
For sure.
It's just that this doesn't change whatever we may or may not feel.
But here's where I lose some interest, and then where I'll tell you where I gain it back. It's always fun to get a new pitcher, you know what I mean? Or a new player. And Shota Imanaga, what he does do is, let's live in a hypothetical world where the Cubs, like, they are going to sign one of, I don't think this is necessarily true, but let's live in this world for a second. Ranger Suarez, Framber Valdez, Dylan Cease, Tetsuya Mai. That's pretty much it of those top end starters, right? I think that's mostly those pieces. Okay. So that's like a big time. You're spending $25 million a year on one of those guys. In my head, they were going to do that and then also possibly get the opportunity to spend 18 to 22 million on a second pitcher that has upside. Now, in my head at the time, those guys were like Shane Bieber, Jack Flaherty, maybe Zach Gallen, but and that's what's Michael King is another guy, and we'll talk about him in a second. Those are really exciting players and with a lot of upside, and there's downside risk for all of them. That's why they're not the $30 million players. That's the whole point. But I like that. But then I sort of went full circle and I went, well, hang on a second. Shota Imanaga is also one of those guys that has mid rotation upside, has shown and demonstrated ability to get big leaguers out over the course of a full season at a good clip, a good rate. It didn't work in the second half of this year, and a lot of our biggest fears materialized, and that is concerning. That is true. Like I think that that's a fair point, but I also think that like if Shota wasn't on our team, if he was some other team's player and got the qualifying offer, rejected it, or never got a qualifying offer and was just a free agent, I would have absolutely included him in the list of guys in that second tier of like, oh, well, maybe that's a guy they can look at. Yeah, he had a rough second half, but look at how he's good as 2024 was and first half of 2025. So like, I have to remind myself of that. Like it was 3 months ago when we thought he was a great pitcher, or 4 months ago. You know what I mean? Like we're not that far removed. There are concerns. I do like some other guys better, but I do think that having him is still preserves the upside that I was hoping they would be able to capture on a second free agent starting pitcher deal this offseason.
I think that's a really thoughtful way of looking at it. I think to put it another way, it's sort of separating us as consumers of off-season content and consumers of a baseball season. Because on the one hand, when we say, I was like hoping for one of those other second tier guys because I wanted to think about the upside and that's actually an off-season conversation. You know, it's like I want to live in a world where I'm dreaming on that fun stuff, either before he signs, after he signs, whatever. But when the season arrives, ultimately, do we really know that Zach Gallen is going to have a better 2026 than Shota?
No, right.
Would it shock anyone if Shota had a way better? See, right? It wouldn't shock.
It shouldn't. Right? He's not old. Like
and
he did have an injury. Like it is possible. Now, here's the dream scenario that maybe is not available to them anymore, although it is in a different route, is that maybe they would have traded for Joe Ryan and signed Michael King, and then you have extra $25 million to give to Alex Bregman or whatever, but they could still trade for Joe Ryan right now and do the same thing. So it's just about which guy you're trading for, which guy you're signing, and whatever. I mean, we looked at the finances. They have plenty of money to spend. So much money is coming off the books next year, even more now that Shota is a one and done. It is, you know, if ever there were a time to spend more, I've said that 15 times in my life. It does make a little bit of sense. It's okay to go over in that, you know, if you went over even by a little bit this off season, so much is coming off that any penalties that persist through the next CBA are likely not, like the Cubs would have to spend a metric ton of money.
Oh yeah. To get
get back up, you know what I mean? So I'm not so sure that bothers me or I'm concerned that much, but we'll see. And, you know, outside of a few stray rumors, they don't seem to be that connected to any high price free agents anyway, other than the big starting pitcher. So like,
and I think it's worth noting here too, that Patrick Mooney at The Athletic was the one who broke the news that Shota was accepting. He also was one of the first this offseason to indicate that the Cubs were going to be shopping in a higher tier of starting pitcher than they normally do. And his, professional background as a rumor source and writer does not skew toward being overly optimistic about the Cubs.
I was going to interject and say as an exotic dancer or something. Didn't get a chance.
And so when Mooney in his report, the full write-up about Imanaga accepting the qualifying offer, reiterates that the Cubs are still looking at that higher tier of starting pitcher, it does lead me to believe that that's likely true. Not just because I'm taking Mooney at his word, although there's no reason not to believe his sources, but just because against that context of like, this is the story he's been telling from the jump, and it's just not like him to kind of be pulling out optimistic threads for no reason. And so again, I feel like I have to keep reiterating my Debbie Downer point that I've been saying since the start of the offseason, which is this is a front office that and front office group and ownership group that has not signed a starting pitcher to a 9-figure contract for 8 years. And it would be completely fallacious to suggest that there haven't been good opportunities in those 8 years to sign. Like, well, it just played out that way, that there were no great starting, no, come on.
No,
there were tons of great fits.
I do wonder, and it's just starting to like illuminate something for me too, is, sometimes like I get frustrated by the idea. So whenever the Cubs don't spend, I get frustrated, but when there's a certain opportunity that arises and some other team that we presume is also smart and also run by, logical fact, statistical based information, goes out there and signs a player to a certain contract that we think the Cubs wouldn't have come close to, or they try on the same player, but it's their offers less or whatever.
Max Fried last year, for example.
Right. Perfect example. I do start to wonder if it's, if the leash we're not giving ourselves or allowing in our analysis is the timing of those deals relative to the exact organization that is willing to sign them. By which I mean signing Dylan Cease to a $170 million deal this offseason makes more sense for the Cubs, not just like in what their needs are, but also in where their finances are, and not just long-term, but where they are spread out on the roster and where players are in their respective contractual journey. Whereas let's say 2 years ago, if you could time travel Dylan Cease back so he's the same age, same free agency, it's like, well, they wouldn't do it then. They will do it now because the circumstances of the roster itself are different. Maybe if Max Fried were a free agent this offseason, they would. I'm not trying to give them more credit than I'm saying. Maybe that's some of the gap that we can bridge by saying the circumstances of this particular offseason is different.
You know what? I agree with you, but what's interesting, and it's going to sound like I'm disagreeing with you, but it's because I know I can hear Jed and Carter in my head responding to that by saying, no, it's really just about the player. It's whether we believe in the player. And if we're really convicted about a player, you want to get that guy anytime it makes even a little bit of sense. And with a starting pitcher, in theory, pretty much every offseason you could justify, right? Like one big starting pitcher. But I agree with you that ignores just the realities of where the farm system is, who you've got coming, what the labor situation is, what the long-term books are, what the short-term books are, all these things that are, as the offseason goes on, making it clear that right now, as far as the starting pitcher goes, this is as make sensey as it has been in the last 8 years for the Cubs to go big on a starting pitcher. And it's a pretty strong market too.
I actually really like the options. I want to ask you before we get into King, which is I think what we'll do.
That's kind of where
next.
I was. Yeah.
But I just one sidestep, one digression before that. Do you have a preference between, like, let's say they all were going to cost the same, which they won't, but let's say between, a Framber Valdez, Ranger Suarez type who has plenty of upside, but like they make their money on ground balls. And we've talked about this, but with the Cubs defense, or a Dylan Cease, maybe a my type who might be a little bit more strikeout velocity. Like, do you have a preference? Again, I know you can't separate the money, but just pretend for a second that they're
well, like, and the Cubs have said this, if you separate the money, well, then you always want the guy who doesn't allow balls in play, right? Because balls in play can become damage. Balls that aren't in play can't become damage. Now, even that's not really answering the question, because like, so say what I was comparing there was Dylan Cease and Framber Valdez. Mm-hmm. Well, Dylan Cease isn't just a guy who strikes everybody out. He also gives up a lot of damage. And
right.
So it's
I was going to say, there's less of contact in play, but it's harder contact. Right. So that's and
so historically, we know what the Cubs have chosen. They have clearly felt like there's an efficiency and just a straight up production value in going for those guys that manage contact better. And I don't think they've been wrong. I think the numbers and the results have pretty much borne them out on that. The issue is, are they always going to have this great defense? Like, we've become spoiled a little bit that the Cubs, going back to 2015, especially the transition from 2015 to 2016, where there was more emphasis put on defense, they have generally had, at least in the infield, a very strong defensive infield. That's 10 years of that, but like, and it bridges, roughly 8 players or so that have contributed individually to that great defense. But like, what if that changes in 2 years? And then you're like,
but it might also be a Jed Hoyer, philosophy.
Target that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's possible. He did spend on, I know, like, Dansby Swanson got a very big deal, and defense is like his thing.
Sure.
Well, let me tee something up for you then, because this is one thing I found when I was writing up the multiple reports that Michael King is one of the free agent options and targets of the Chicago Cubs this offseason. One thing we talk about when we're talking about adding a free agent pitcher is not just adding the best pitcher available, because sure, you always want to do that, but a big point of the extra value is diversifying the rotation, right? There's a lot of left-handers, there's a lot of soft tossers, there's a lot of contact managers. So you typically want to, or not typically, but it's not out of question, out of hand to suggest, hey, maybe a righty that throws hard and misses bats provides some diversity that is a bonus value to whatever quality of pitcher that you get. Now, Dylan Cease is that guy. Michael King, though, let me point something out to you. He's not, a hard throwing righty, but he's got a solid fastball. It's like 94-ish. He's got a lot of pitches that he uses all almost equally, which is something the Cubs love, because that's a big foundation to move things around. I think he has comfort with 4+ pitches, and that's just something that they seem to prioritize. But here's the biggest part, and the point I was trying to make. Setting 2025 aside, though, it's still good, but this was better cherry picked the way I wanted to cherry pick it. From 2022 to 2024, Michael King had a 72.2% contact rate, which is the 9th lowest in Major League Baseball. That's ahead of guys like Pablo Lopez, Tariq Skubal, Hunter Green. So in terms of diversifying, what you're getting, Michael King does fit the mold in a certain way. And that's that he does miss bats from the right side. And that's not, I know it's not the same thing, but I mean, he strikes guys out. He's, it is a different profile. It's not like you're just going and getting another
he didn't
91 mile an hour guy.
And he didn't manage contact all that well in 2025 either. So a lot of his success was, now his strikeout rate dropped a good bit in 2025. Health issues, questions. That's kind of the big risk with him is, he missed half the season. My thing with your point there on King is that I don't want to listen. Nobody loves arbitrary endpoints on statistics more than me. I am the champion of being like, well, but ever since June 17th, he da-da-da-da-da. The thing with King that kind of plays with that a little bit, although I'll have to dig in on the numbers specifically, is he was a reliever for, how far did you go back?
Yeah, 2022. That's the first year but he started in 2023. So
yeah, late in the
39
year.
Starts, and it's majority of his innings too.
Sure. But just as a note, because he did, I think as a reliever, he was more leaning just fastball slider. He had like that unbelievable.
Well,
slider.
so then think about it this way. Last season, his worst season as a starter, he had a 24.7% strikeout rate. The highest Cubs starter had a 21.4% strikeout rate. So his worst, I mean, it's not, he is going to strike out more batters.
It is funny, by the way,
bats than the Cubs starting pitchers.
This is how used to not seeing starters get strikeouts we are, is that when Cade Horton comes in, and I think it was like 21% or so, which is around league average, maybe slightly lower than league average, feels like Cade Horton was striking out tons of dudes. Like, it just feels that way because we are not used to seeing that. Like, even Justin Steele, who's this fantastic starting pitcher, and he's been great for 3 years, he was always like a little bit above league average, but a lot of his success was managing contact. And so, I generally, to your bigger point though, yes, love the idea of getting someone whose style, whose delivery, whose pitch mix is just differentiated from what the rest of the Cubs are doing. Now, I don't know if we're right about that, because I think that there's probably an argument to be made that if you have similar styles of pitchers, while that allows opposing batting orders to kind of see some familiar things throughout a series, it does also allow those pitchers to learn from each other, to enhance each other's performance, to kind of sort of pitch to the effects of a ballpark, better, figure things out together in a way that sort of, and to choose your pitchers in a way that sort of works better at Wrigley. And I think the Cubs, they've had a proclivity for lefties now for a while, like all sort of an all else equal. They've kind of leaned lefty. And I wonder if there's something about Wrigley. Like, we know,
there might be.
Well, we know lefty hitters don't do as well on the power side, just because right field is a little harder to homer to than left. But there could be something with like the batter's eye, or I that's my suspicion, is that maybe righties don't, when the ball's coming from a lefty, that they just maybe don't see the ball quite as well. That's my guess. And that's not something that the Cubs are, if that's true, they're going to guard that secret with their life.
Oh yeah. Scott Boras would exploit that. I have another medium take that I think is true. So you look back at the last couple drafts, the Cubs took Cade Horton, Ethan Conrad, two guys who were injured and therefore sort of available. Cade Horton's a little bit of a different story. I know they sort of theoretically reached for him, but there was a something there. Ethan Conrad injured. Michael Soroka they traded for, and in free agency they signed Matthew Boyd. I have a feeling the Cubs think previous or recent injuries that are overcomable is a market inefficiency, because it's a way to capture more upside at lower costs. Michael King has significant concerns. So did Matthew Boyd. But like that was the best version of it working out last year with Boyd, in all honesty. Obviously it affected them in the second half, no doubt, but they got an all-star for the first half at a price that you cannot get that level of performance at for $14 million or whatever. So I think that there's something to that as well, where they say, listen, this guy missed some starts last year. He had some injuries, but we, assuming the actual long-term diagnosis is not overwhelmingly bleak, then this is a way we could get a guy for $100 million that, if healthy, would have cost $200 million.
Right. Like that the market overcorrects for injury risks more than the Cubs internally value it.
And I think they might do that in the draft, in trade, in free agency. And I think it's a shame that they maybe have to operate that way, but it does open the door for targets that could surprise. Because if they stay healthy, if they're Matthew Boyd, then you have an all-star for the first half or something. Like are we really, does everyone forget what Michael King did a year and a half ago? Like,
he's a stud.
It was
one
awesome.
of the best starters in baseball. I mean, I think
he got, I think he finished 7th or 9th in the Cy Young vote. Like he was a legitimately great starting pitcher. If he were healthy this year, he'd be among the top of, So that's what I'm saying. If you can.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think, again, Cubs would say, they would underscore the player, not the money. They'd be like, well, it's just say they go hard after King and not cease. Right? They'd be like, well, we just really believe in Michael King. And maybe that's true. Maybe it's not.
They would obfuscate why they're not spending more on the more established. Really? They would?
But I think it goes back to the point that I made about Shota for this next year. It's like, would it shock you if Michael King outperformed Dylan Cease in 2026? No. I mean, you can you can make these decisions. You just got to be right. If you're going to be cute like that, like they were with Matthew Boyd. I remember that was one of the first signings of the offseason around baseball. And the deal he got was a lot more than people were thinking.
Yeah.
And it was big enough that it was like, oh, I don't know what else they're going to do in the rotation after this. And
then they signed Colin Ray. And then we were like, no. And then it was like Colin Ray saved our season.
Yeah,
practically.
Thank God they got an option on him. He got to retain him. Yeah, it's funny. I went back to read what I had written about the Colin Ray signing in light of how well he did and the fact that he did have that option for next year and whatever. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. I had only nice things to say about the value of having a Colin Ray on your roster. My entire beef with it was it confirmed that they weren't adding another starting pitcher, which I was right.
Maybe about. They probably, they could have added a better, different starting pitcher and then been better.
Yeah. And they should have.
Right.
Yeah. But I knew from where the budget was and the roster makeup, it was like, oh, if they're giving him a big league deal, that's it.
Yeah. I have a hard time. We always have to talk about this stuff. And it's like, listen, there's a difference between what they should do, which we can be the most, crazy about and say they should spend unlimited money to do it. Then there's what they should do in a reasonable sense where we go, sometimes you could pull back and sometimes it makes sense. They should be going all in on the 1 year they have Kyle Tucker or whatever. And then there's what they will likely do based on what we know to be the fact that, guess what? At the end of the day, the Cubs budget last year was $218 million with, 8 to 10 million more available for them to get up to 227 where they did. That's what they wanted to be at. That's why Jed Hoyer had to make a special note from his doctor to hand to Tom Ricketts to make an offer to Alex Bregman, just like he did the year before with Cody Bellinger. That's where their payroll was. It was 215 to 220, and they had room to go up as needed for a little bit. And if they wanted to do anything bigger, it needed to be a special exception. So that is the reality. And with Shota, they're at around 191 million. So maybe they have a little bit more than usual. They had 5 playoff games this year. I'm sure that helped. I'm sure a lot of things I can make up reasons for why but whatever. They have room to get one big free agent on an AAV deal. And I think this is one of those years where, for lots of reasons why next season makes sense, they also have the ability to maybe get a second higher priced free agent, not two $30 million a year guys, maybe, but something that's more expensive than normal, because it will only be on the books like that for 1 year. Future budgets still count and still matter, and that still impacts that. But you will have a 2 to 3 year rollout where it's not like 2016, 2017, 2018, when all these 4 or 5 studs were hitting arbitration at the same time and making 12 to 20 plus million a year in arbitration. That's not happening to the Cubs right now. And it won't, for most of their guys over the next few years. Justin Steele's the only one. And because he missed this whole year, that's going to ding him pretty significantly in what he will ultimately earn through arbitration.
And let's not ignore too that the Cubs can be really good and competitive in 2026. And so we haven't even mentioned in any of this that that's the main reason why, because the financial stuff lines up, you should be pushing very aggressively in the area where you can most easily add a number of wins. Now, I like the way that sets us up for the transaction corner, because I have some thoughts on that point. So go for it.
This week's Transaction Corner is brought to you by our partners at Felco. Felco, the home renewal experts. Bleacher Nation is proud to partner with Felco. For almost 50 years, Felco has been transforming Chicagoland homes with their windows, siding, doors, roofing, slides, stairs, chutes, and ladders. Felco's, I don't know. Felco's family owned and prides. I try to keep it fresh. It fresh every day.
I love their chutes.
Yeah, they have great chutes, even better ladders. Felco is family owned and what's your favorite childhood board game? Interrupting this ad for this break.
You know what? I was thinking about that. I don't know about favorite, but I always thought that Candyland was kind of bullshit because it's just like the color of whatever you land. There's no skill in that. There's no talent associated with being good at Candyland. It's just whatever color you land on. You can't even choose when to take the shortcuts
for the kids.
I like it. I wanted give me something where I can get an advantage over my opponent. That's what I wanted.
I won't say your kids' names, but you're like, hey, come here. We're playing Risk, and I'm starting in Africa.
Must have Kamchatka.
Felco is family owned and prides themselves in delighting their customers. With products made in the U.S. and designed specifically for the Midwest, Felco offers a perfect balance of beauty and energy efficiency. Please support Felco because they support us. So this week's transaction corner, would you like to introduce who we were thinking about talking about? Because we're switching things up a little bit.
So this offseason, and it'll continue to be this way, it's going to be very pitching focused, lots of conversations from the Cubs, about pitching. And that is for good reason. It isn't just that they've hidden the ball and we've started to focus on that. It's that when you really take a critical eye at this roster, it's very easy to see how they could improve significantly in the rotation in the bullpen. It's much harder to see how they could realistically improve on the positional side, especially when it's not a great market positionally. However, the one spot that you could point to, particularly for 2026, and say, yeah, I could see something they could do to bump the projected win total a couple and not do any harm long term. And that's at third base. And we've talked about Alex Bregman. There was the past interest there. Michael wrote this rumor that the Cubs may reinvigorate their interest. But there's two other interesting third baseman-ish guys in free agency that I think we thought merited some extra discussion. Oh, obligatory mention. We're not punting Matt Shaw. It's that for a year, Matt Shaw could be a utility guy, continuous development, injuries happen, et cetera, et cetera. And then
he could also play second. Matt Shaw can not instead of Nico Horner. I'm saying in days where you want to give
days when Nico's short.
Nico's at short, giving Dansby a rest, or Nico's getting a rest himself. Matt Shaw doesn't meaningfully degrade the defense. He could play third and second, and then indirectly short is all.
Yes.
There's a lot more opportunity for him.
Nico's a free agent after next year, and then you recalibrate. That doesn't mean you're assuming he's walking, but it means you're going to have to confront this again anyway.
Yeah.
And so at third base / first base / maybe DH, you've got two really interesting hitters coming over from Japan. You've got Munetaka Murakami, who is best known by stateside baseball fans as the dude who hit almost 60 homers or something a few years ago, set the record.
He set the record for Japanese born players. I looked it up. It's frustrating because I always want to write it.
There was
it's
that
56,
dude,
but then
the dude, Ballantine.
I think that's his name. He hit 60 and really just screws everything up because now you have to, every time anyone writes that, you can't say he's the home run champ because he's not, but he's close to.
And then also Kazuma Okamoto, who is a little older.
Better name, by the way. Comes off the tongue real nice.
Oh, yeah. Do you know how I walk around my house just saying Okamoto?
Me too.
I do.
I hope this comes off the way I intended to. I love, this is not good.
This is what you get on the podcast, not in print. In print, you'd write it down and then you'd be like, you know what? Never mind.
Yeah. Okamoto is a great name to say. A lot of Japanese names sound very beautiful off the tongue, and I like saying them. Shota Imanaga. You're telling me that doesn't just taste delicious when you say it?
Yeah, but can I give you one that's got a Latin flavor to it that I just love to say? So I need to look this guy up because I remember nothing about his career other than his name is Hippolito Pichardo.
Okay, see, that's what I mean.
That's just I want him on the Cubs just because so I could say that name.
And then by contrast, Mike Bush. Our first baseman, Mike Bush.
Awful. Yuck. Get him off. Get him out of here.
Terrible
Matt
name.
Shaw. Come on. That's boring.
Now, Nico is pretty good. I think it's a consonant before vowels. Like Nico has
Dansby.
Dansby has a good name.
Yeah.
That's a great baseball name too.
Yeah, Dansby. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail.
What were we talking about?
Yokomoto, Okamoto, and Murakami.
So the Cubs to date have not been particularly rumored about with these guys. And I think there's good reason for that. There are clubs that have more obvious needs at third and first base or DH where at first base, no need there for the Cubs. DH, depending on what happens in the outfield, no need there. It's really a third base question. And there are those out there who believe that Murakami, who's the younger, higher upside hitter of the two, is not going to be able to play third base in the big leagues. That's just sort of a prevailing theory out there among some. Okamoto, it's more of a question of whether he could play third base. A little older, better recent performance in the NPB, but thought to be perhaps a smaller window of contribution to your team. With Murakami, it's almost like a development project because he does have contact issues. And I guess the other point to make that's part and parcel of this discussion is it matters that these guys aren't just typical MLB free agents, that they are superstar players from Japan coming over. And that has extra value. It has extra value in the fandom. It has extra value in the marketing, but it also has extra value in maintaining a pipeline of talent that it's clear the Cubs, it's not a secret. They want to be able to keep bringing in talented players from Japan because that inflow of players is not, I look ahead and I don't think it's slowing down anytime soon.
No.
And so,
in fact, it seems to be increasing. I think you're right. I think, listen, when Shota Imanaga signed with the Cubs, I believe it was him and not Seiya. I'm pretty sure he talked to you, Darvish, about playing for the Cubs.
They both did.
And Darvish, was probably a big help in recruiting those guys and saying, no, this is a place you want to play. And I've been reading a lot about this lately. There are absolutely teams that are not as well situated as the Cubs in supporting players from Japan and their families and having infrastructure in place. And so it's not a surprise. It's not an accident, let's say, that the Cubs are probably the biggest Japanese player destination outside of the West Coast and have been for a while. And I think part of that is making this daisy chain of one Japanese player or two to the next, so that anytime you do find a guy you want, there's already one guy on your team who is from their country, from their league, speaks their language, and it makes it even more reasonable to continue investing in the off-field, support infrastructure. And you can show those guys that this stuff is in place. You're not going to be our first Japanese player. We've had a bunch of guys. We have a guy right now. We have this. I've heard from players about different types of food that they offer in the locker room, specifically for Japanese players to feel more comfortable. And it's like, put yourself in their shoes for 1 second. I'm being dead serious. If two teams in Japan were offering me similar money and one team had a dude I grew up playing baseball with who I basically know and has a history of American players, English speaking support staff, and that's a pretty big difference maker. Is there any world where it's not? No, I don't think so. And so I do think that outside of their actual potential need to add one of these guys at third base, or any guy at third base, the added value of continuing that chain, which will end next season when both Seiya Suzuki and Shota Imanaga are free agents, is some extra non-zero value for the Cubs. Now, Amai could maybe even more easily step into those shoes, as he is a pitcher and a talented one. And that's a position that we know the Cubs will be targeting, but these guys have at least some of the value for that reason. And I don't think it's cynical to suggest it the way I am. I think it's strategic, and I think it's smart of the Cubs to think that way, if that is indeed how they think. And I'm guessing it's probably pretty close to accurate.
Yeah. I mean, we wouldn't think a bit about the way teams approach the Latin market and trying to establish footholds there and scouting pipelines and retention pipelines and setting up a complex in the Dominican Republic to make guys feel comfortable and ensure that their friends tell their families, so that everybody feels comfortable. Like, I think it's because the guys from Japan are like established professionals that maybe we feel a little extra deference to that they, I don't want to say that they wouldn't care about that extra stuff, but like, I think we don't think about it as much because they're signing $100 million contracts. But no, they're still humans who are going to want to feel good about what they're doing, and they're going to want to see.
They're going to get $100 million either way, too.
Yeah, They're going to want to see that they can go somewhere, that they'll feel good and they can have success. And I know that a part of that is feeling like I'm going to a place that's going to understand me literally and metaphorically, and is going to help me get the best out of this really difficult transition to a totally different style and caliber of play in a new country. Having a track record matters. And outside of the Dodgers, who, are certainly going to pace the field on that for a while, I think the Cubs do have a pretty good claim to being able to show that they've had success in this. And, I think
probably
all
doesn't
we're
hurt
saying,
they just played in Japan either and had Shota start a game and say, I don't know. I also out here. So I want to get a little bit more specific because I want to pick your brain on this, and I'm going to tee it up for you and then let you be the one to sort of take it home. Okay. Murakami is the younger home run champ, quote unquote, with greater upside, but much more risk. And he will be more expensive.
Yes.
Almost certainly. Okamoto is a little older, but has a lot of success recently and is more likely to, have an immediate floor that is higher than Murakami's. Okay. That is the two guys. Murakami, young, mashing, giant upside, lots of risk because he strikes out a ridiculous amount.
And more defensive limitation.
And more defensive limitations. Okamoto, higher floor offensively, defensively, should cost less, but is a little bit older. I have a hard time justifying any version of Murakami being a target of the Cubs.
Other than if they believed that he was just such a titanic talent that they're like, we don't care about the fit at all. We actually think he's going to translate unbelievably well in our organization to MLB, and we can't know that.
I know that's hard. You got to be so confident that you could change things.
Yeah.
Let's maybe, I don't know if you have I'm sure you don't have the numbers in front of you, but his strikeout rate in the MPB was like 30%, right?
Yes.
Which is
outrageously
absurd. High. You can't do that.
I saw, oh gosh, forgive me. I'm forgetting the account and I hate this because I can't give credit, but there's an account that covers NPB and, translates a lot of stuff to the United States. And he created like StatCast, like sliders for,
cool.
And Murakami's contact rate. So, which is even, I think, more valuable than strikeout rate. First percentile, literally first percentile. And that's as scary as it gets in translating to Major League Baseball, where that's your biggest risk as a hitter, is the inability to make contact against superior pitching quality.
If Patrick Wisdom went to
Japan,
seen it.
We've seen it.
There's a lot of guys who was the Rangers home run, like 2016 to 2022 guy. Then he played center, I want to say, but he was like a crazy strikeout. He's a big name. I'm just blanking on him.
I'm totally blanking. Yeah.
Whatever. My point is, lots of guys, there are guys that can hit homers, and there's guys that you could take in the MLB or the upper levels of the minors right now, put them in the MPB, and they might hit 50 homers a year, and you would be thinking about them differently if they were coming out. You know what I mean? So it's important to keep that in mind. But at the same time, every single projection is like, no, he's going to get 150 million or something. Yeah. And so
it's because what you're paying for is that 10% chance that he is that he adjusts, because he's only 25. Like there's still,
and it's not the same thing at all, but like Yamamoto was similarly young, and it's like, wow, you're giving him 325. And it's like, guess what? Now it looks like that was a totally fine way to spend $325 million, which is not the same story, but I'm saying it's like when you're that young and have that elite of a skill, it is possible that there's a version of that sort of deal. But again, so basically we agree though, it's like, if either of these guys make sense, it's Okamoto.
Yeah. And I would add that I think Okamoto actually makes a ton of sense if he's not getting a super long-term deal. I think it would have to be heavily weighted toward the value you're getting in 2026, which is when he makes the most sense for the Cubs, which I know doesn't serve our purposes for like the conversation we just had about extending the duration of Japanese players with the Cubs. But
He's not going to get a 1-year deal. Regardless, he's not coming over to America for 1 year.
Right, he's not. So. And like the point there being, if he were, then I think the Cubs would be like sprinting to be involved. Unless, again, they've looked at his game and they're like, he's not going to translate well for reasons.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you almost, I don't even mean to just, we can always have that caveat, right? Every front office can have its own, and they could say, oh, well, we actually don't think.
Yeah, but I think it's important to point it out just because it's a little different than like projecting Michael King on the Cubs. We've got a lot of one-to-one data that we can look at, whereas MPB, it's a different ball. It's different players. It's different stratification of players.
I think as the years go by, though, we're better at it, or we as a collective statistical society of baseball analysts are getting better at saying, this is actually how that translates. Like, because we have more data in isolation because we are advancing our data capturing techniques, and more data of time as every year passes by and there's more opportunities. So I think,
more examples of like, this guy worked, this guy didn't work. What do they have in common? Okay. How do we,
we're borderline, not entirely, but we're almost getting to the point where people don't just only exclusively compare one Japanese player to another Japanese player. And I don't think it's racist or anything. I just think it's like we were always like, well, didn't work out with that. It's like, okay, these are literally different human beings of size, weight, height, experience. You know what I mean? Like it is a little silly to do that.
Yes. But it was also, I guess, looking back, it was also silly to ignore the things that like you're moving from Japan and that league to play in this league has more in common than a guy moving from New York to Chicago and staying in the same league. So like there are reasons that's
true too. I definitely agree. So Okamoto, you think let's wrap it up this way. Do you think that they will demonstrate any serious interest?
No, I wish they would though. I'm interested. Okay. I think I like the idea of going after Japanese stars pretty much every time they're available. I think there's value in that. I like the ability to upgrade at third, or the potential to upgrade at third base. I like that he's a righty bat who could also chip in at first base if you wanted to do that. Mm-hmm. I believe he's played a little left field. I might be speaking out of turn on that one, and I certainly couldn't speak to whether he's any good at it. But the last 2 years in the NPB, he's hit like pretty close to how Seiya hit. Now Seiya was much younger, but I'm just saying the results, they were similar type hitters, and the results were the same. And
let's end on a nice positive, because you know what? You go back and look at Seiya's deal and how much he's making next year, and you're like, this is that's below market deal for Seiya Suzuki.
Big time.
That's a good deal. So hopefully the Cubs can find some more good deals in the Japanese market or otherwise this offseason. But I'm interested. I was doing the thing where I was going to wind it down.
And I was watching. I was like,
this is not really my job.
Is he going to?
No, I won't steal this from you.
Steal my thunder?
Yeah. Go for it.
It's the BN Cubs podcast.
Wait, that's just actually NBA on TNT, I think. Give me the ball because I'm gonna shoot it. Yeah.
We gotta stop. We're gonna get a takedown if we hum too many notes.
I think my tone, my pitch is off enough that we'll miss the AI filters.
We are parodying that song, which is fair use. It's the BN Cubs podcast. I'm Brett Taylor. That's Michael Cerami. We write at bleachernation.com. Check us out there. Check out our sponsor, Ankin Law, 312-6million, injury law made personal. Thank you for helping us put this on. And we will be talking back at you next week. We'll have to figure out Thanksgiving. It's next Thursday. So we will have to go.
Maybe we'll do Wednesday or something.
Yeah. All right. Either way, you'll hear from us next week, folks. Take care.